I'm meteorologist Melissa Norb with the 11 Live Weather Impact Team, and here in Atlanta we are tracking Hurricane Milton, which is now a beastly Category 5 storm in the southwest Gulf of Mexico. And this storm has undergone one of the most impressive rapid intensification cycles on record. We're talking about it going from a Category 1 to a Category 5 in a matter of just one morning. And now the winds have increased even more. We just got the 2 o'clock advisory in from the Hurricane Center a couple of minutes ago. The winds are now up to 175 miles per hour. What I want to point out as we look at this satellite is it is this really symmetrical buzzsaw shape right in the center. It's a very tiny compact storm right now, but this thing's going to get a lot bigger later on, and you can see that storm is just wobbling there just west of the Yucatan Peninsula, and as we head into tonight it's going to be going very close to the shoreline there. Let's talk about how quickly this thing sped up, and then we'll talk about the latest track from the Hurricane Center. I want to show you this wind speed history, and you can see this thing just took off today. In fact, in a 24-hour window, 11 yesterday to 11 today, we had the winds increasing 90 miles per hour in that single window. So it was the third strongest strengthening on record in terms of the wind speeds increasing in a 24-hour window, with just Wilma in 2005 and Felix in 2007 strengthening quicker than that. But now we have the pressure that has dropped even more in the last couple of hours. That pressure at 11 o'clock this morning was 933 millibars. By 12 o'clock it had dropped to 925, and now at 2 o'clock the pressure is now down to 911. The hurricane force winds go 30 miles outside the center. The tropical storm force winds extend 80 miles outside the center. What's going to happen from here is you're going to notice on this forecast cone that we're not going to have the same strength of max winds by the time it makes landfall as what it does now, but the size of the storm is going to get a lot bigger, and that means bigger picture impacts for the winds and also storm surge with a larger system that's moving quickly. You notice there are hurricane warnings on the northern side of the Yucatan Peninsula, and as we zoom into Florida, they now have these hurricane watches extended all the way almost to the east coast of Florida. So this storm, because we don't know exactly where landfall is going to be yet, and because it will be a large storm, we expect that hurricane force winds will go a lot larger of a territory than where they are now, and that's why they've put out these hurricane watches all the way down to the Fort Myers area and all the way up to kind of Crystal River area as well. And then tropical storm watches are in yellow right here, but a big chunk of real estate is under mandatory evacuations or voluntary evacuations along the coast because of the storm surge impacts that we're expecting from Milton. So again, this is Category 5 now. The winds, when Chesley was on air first thing this morning at the 5 o'clock advisory, it was just a Category 2. Now it's a Category 5, 175-mile winds, higher gusts even. It's moving to the east at 9 miles per hour, and it's going to keep that general east direction, getting really close to the northern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula early tomorrow morning. Then as we look at later tomorrow and into Wednesday, the steering currents shift a little bit. So this thing will take more of a northeasterly trajectory. And as it's going through that whole cycle, it's going to get larger in size. It's going to undergo what we call eye wall replacement cycles. And as that happens, sure, the max winds may come down a little bit, but the size of the storm is going to be much larger as it makes its way to the west coast of Florida. So tomorrow it's moving through kind of the eastern Gulf of Mexico, closing in on landfall. We still expect that landfall to happen sometime late Wednesday evening. Some of our models have slowed it down to Wednesday overnight, but regardless, the timeline of this puts it on a course for the west coast of Florida with significant impacts likely. Now, it will be moving quickly, and it's moving pretty much kind of southwest to northeast as it's pushing across the peninsula, but more of that easterly component than northerly component. So we're hoping that that means it's moving quick enough to where it's a very short-lived, very catastrophic, but at least short-lived in terms of how long those max winds will end up lasting. And then as it makes its way out east of the coast, eventually moving over some slightly cooler waters, encountering some wind shear and such. So we should see it weakening as it makes its way off the east coast of Florida. Spaghetti models today. You notice they've taken a shift. They're still pretty wide for landfall. We've got one cluster that's right over the Tampa Bay area, still some that are clustered south. Okay, so that's a pretty decent spread in the spaghetti model still with where landfall is going to be. And that's why the bottom line is, if you're in one of these evacuation orders, if you're in a hurricane watch, you need to be prepared. So in North Georgia, where I'm broadcasting from, luckily this storm we're not going to get impacted by. But anybody who's down in Florida, from really Gainesville south through Naples, they need to be prepared. You got to be prepared for food for 3 days, water, and think about power outages. If you're near landfall, those power outages could last for days. And also along the coast, it's the water rise and the little inlets as well along the west coast of Florida will get significant storm surge as well because of the direction of the winds as Milton's coming inland. I want to show you the peak storm surge forecast from the National Hurricane Center. And this is not going to tell the full scale of how things are going to unfold. As we get closer to landfall, we'll know better. Okay, where's the landfall going to be? Just south of landfall, that's where the worst storm surge is going to be. Just north of landfall, the storm surge won't be as bad, okay, because of the winds around the center of Milton. But you notice everybody from just south of Cedar Key down to the Tampa Bay metro area, so that includes this whole Pinellas County right here through Tampa, the old Tampa Bay, Hillsborough Bay, all these areas who just got impacted by Helene a week and a half ago are once again looking at significant storm surge. Now, the peak storm surge in Tampa Bay was about 7 feet in Helene. This forecast is up to 12 feet of storm surge. So that's higher storm surge levels. You can't get through a first-story building at 12 feet storm surge. Okay, 12 feet goes into the second story of these buildings. We'll go further down the coast. You see from Sarasota to Venice Beach, Port Charlotte, Fort Myers, even some of these areas could see storm surge levels if the path of Milton goes a little further south and really close to the center, could see the storm surge up to 12 feet. And even if Milton is, 150 miles to the north, they're still going to see significant storm surge. So everybody's got to be prepared on the west coast for this rise in water level. It is water that is the #1 killer in hurricanes, in these hurricane systems that are landfalling. It's the storm surge and the inland flooding that causes the biggest impacts. And we are expecting big rainfall in South Florida as well. You can see anywhere from Jacksonville south. We're expecting rain totals that could be 5, 7, even some 10+ inch rainfall totals. So there will be major impacts expected. A lot of folks are going to be evacuating. If they're evacuating, they're being asked by the Georgia Emergency Management Association not to evacuate to South Georgia, but to come up to Macon or up to Atlanta, because South Georgia was just hit very hard by Helene, and there are still power outages that are ongoing a week and a half later. You can see that's where Milton is right now. A lot of rain moving across the Florida Peninsula right now. But again, North Georgia, we've got this front that's coming through right now, and this is going to stall out and help to steer Milton off the Florida East Coast and not bring it northward up into any part of Georgia. Let me show you a big picture of forecast track. This is our in-house run. This is not the official run from the Hurricane Center. This is an in-house model. So this shows us these high resolution models, what it actually might look like on radar imagery. You can see through tomorrow morning, very close to that northern edge of the Yucatan Peninsula. Then it turns into a larger storm in size as it's getting closer to the west coast of Florida. Now, this particular model run doesn't have landfall until early Thursday morning. It has it slowing down a little bit. But again, that Hurricane Center cone has that landfall Wednesday evening. So making landfalls, we look at sometime Wednesday evening or overnight. This model doesn't have it until Thursday morning, but I want you to be prepared for that Wednesday time frame for the landfall. So again, just recapping, we're just got the 2 o'clock advisory in. Milton continues to strengthen. The max winds now up to 175 miles per hour. The hurricane force winds are extending about 30 miles outside the center. The tropical storm force winds are only extending 80 miles outside the center. This is going to get to be a larger storm as it makes its way closer to landfall. The pressure has been dropping as well as this thing's strengthening, now down to 911 millibars. So we could even see that, if it gets stronger, dip into the 800s. Here's the forecast cone of uncertainty from the Hurricane Center. Remember, as this thing turns larger, the impacts will be felt well outside the center of the storm. Approaching the coast as a Category 4 hurricane, maybe weakening to a 3 by landfall. The impacts are not going to change. The big storm, with the direction of the winds, it's pushing all all of this water up along the coast, and as it moves inland, it's dropping significant rainfall here that will potentially cause inland flooding. Our next update comes in at 5 o'clock today from the Hurricane Center. We will have that live on 11 Live News starting at 4 o'clock today for the latest. This is Hurricane Milton. I'm meteorologist Melissa North with 11 Live News. We will have the latest advisory today on 11 Live at 5 o'clock.